So most machines learn through a system called a neural network. Most computer vision is done through convolutional neural networks. And through the rest of this lesson, we're going to talk about first how computers see images, then how neural networks work, and then how convolutional neural networks work in particular. And as always, we'll end with people who work in computer vision. How computers see images. They see images as a bunch of pixels. If you had not heard of a pixel before, there's this really great site. So here's an image. You can make it whatever image you want, but you can see that if you zoom out, it's a pretty normal image. But if you zoom in, you can tell that this pretty normal image is made up of a bunch of squares. And eventually, if you zoom in far enough, those squares have numbers on them. Those numbers are RGB values. The R stands for red, the G stands for green, and the B stands for blue. Every R, G, and B value will be somewhere between 255 and 0, depending on how much more there is of any given thing. So to look at RGB values, there is this site, which lets you upload an image of your choice. You do need to have access to images on your computer to be able to do this. But it lets you upload an image of your choice. Let's do the image that I use in the example is in this folder. This is a character that I played in a LARP. But you can look at what happens if you see just the green values from this picture. So this picture is made up of red, green, and blue values. If I remove all the red and remove all the blue, it looks like that. I can remove all the blue and all of the green, and it would look like this. Or I can just remove all of the blue, and it would look like this. So you can just play with the idea that there are R, G, and B values involved on every pixel of this image. So that is how computers view images. What are computers seeing when they look at images? Based on so as a human, we tend to see the whole image all at once. Yep. And as a machine, you're looking at very specific, you're looking at pixels. And what you know about the pixels is what their numeric red, green, and blue values are. So now that we understand that, next we are going to talk about how neural networks work. So there's a lot of definitions of parts of a neural network. We're going to go through each of these in more detail. Also, I should have pulled up the Jamboard already. Hang on, let me pull up the Jamboard. I'll get there in a moment. So we're going to go through each of these things in more detail. But just to start out, a neuron is basically just a calculation. It's given some input, it does some math to it, there is an output. That output might be higher than, if that output is higher, then the neuron is considered to be activated. If that output is lower, then it isn't. What your neural network is learning is what those activation levels are. The input layer is just all the starting information that's going into your neural network. In our case at the moment, it's all the pixels. In natural language processing, it's often, just lots of words.
Sarah, would that just be considered data? Or
Yep,
is it getting more specific in types of data?
It's just data. Whatever you are feeding the neural network as input, which is just data. Does that?
Yes, I just wondered why they said input layer as opposed to just data. Yeah. It seemed like it's more specific or something.
So Data is the input layer of a neural network. It's just when we're talking about the neural network itself, we're talking about the individual neurons. And the input layer of neurons is the data that's being sent in. The output layer will do whatever your neural network is doing. So in the case of our numbers that we were drawing, the output layer just said what number it was. So the input layer is the piece of information you're giving it. So like the picture or whatever. The output layer is the piece of information the neural network is sending out. So like the number 3. And hidden layers are all the stuff in between. So you can see it on Nick's image here. There's the input layer. There's a bunch of dots, and they're connected to each other. And then there's an output bunch of dots. That is a neural network. All of the stuff in the middle are hidden layers. And then activation is when a neuron has found what it is looking for. A neural network is just that whole thing. So that was a lot of information all in one go. We're going to actually go through the video and take it step by step. So starting with just why it's hard for a computer to recognize a handwritten digit to be.
This is a 3. It's sloppily written and rendered at an extremely low resolution of 28 by 28 pixels, but your brain has no trouble recognizing it as a 3. And I want you to take a moment to appreciate how crazy it is that brains can do this so effortlessly. I mean, this, and this are also recognizable as 3s, even though the specific values of each pixel is very different from one image to the next. The particular light-sensitive cells in your eye that are firing when you see this 3 are very different from the ones firing when you see this 3. But something in that crazy smart visual cortex of yours resolves these as representing the same idea, while at the same time recognizing other images as their own distinct ideas. But if I told you, hey, sit down and write for me a program that takes in a grid of 28 by 28 pixels like this, and outputs a single number between 0 and 10, telling you what it thinks the digit is, well, the task goes from comically trivial to dauntingly difficult.
All right, so the question for understanding that, check another video. Why is it hard for a computer to recognize a handwritten digit? I'm going to put that. Yeah, basically pixels, right? We put the whole thing together in our head pretty easy. The computer, the pixels of each of those 3s were quite different. So next area. Yeah. Oh,
As the name suggests, neural networks are inspired by the brain. But let's break that down. What are the neurons, and in what sense are they linked together? Right now, when I say neuron, all I want you to think about is a thing that holds a number, specifically a number between 0 and 1. It's really not more than that. For example, the network starts with a bunch of neurons corresponding to each of the 28 times 28 pixels of the input image, which is 784 neurons in total. Each one of these holds a number that represents the grayscale value of the corresponding pixel, ranging from 0 for black pixels up to 1 for white pixels. This number inside the neuron is called its activation. And the image you might have in mind here is that each neuron is lit up when its activation is a high number.
Cool. So what's a neuron? In this video, at least, they're going to go deeper. A calculation. Yep.
Yeah, it's a calculation.
Also a thing that I should be more clear about. When we talked about facial recognition works because we have given computers lots of data. That is for making the model. So that is for figuring out what the activation codes and everything should be. This is going to be the model has been made. So this is just when you send it something, how the model works. That difference is was not very clear. Let's see. So when we talk about when we did the AI for drawing, AI and drawing earlier on, all of those pictures that we saw in data were the data that had trained the neural network already. Whereas when we were playing with it, it was the data that was being sent to the neural network to figure out what it is. And eventually that also becomes part of the data that trains it. It keeps training over time. But this is not talking about the training. This is just talking about how it does the recognition in the first place. So, and inputs and output layers.
So all of these 784 neurons make up the first layer of our network. Now jumping over to the last layer, this has 10 neurons, each representing one of the digits. The activation in these neurons, again, some number that's between 0 and 1, represents how much the system thinks that a given image corresponds with a given digit.
So in this example, what's making up the input layer?
Could we rewatch the clip, please?
Totally.
So all of these 784 neurons make up the first layer of our network. Now jumping over to the last layer, this has 10 neurons, each representing one of the digits. The activation in these neurons, again, some number that's between 0 and 1, represents how much the system thinks that a given image corresponds with a given digit.
So each of these 784 neurons is a reference to the previous video, which is the 784 neurons are just the pixels in the number itself.
Is it like how likely it is to be? Confidence?
Yeah, so the output layer will give you a confidence level for which number it is you're looking at. And the input layer, and the input layer is the 28 by 28, 784 pixels of the image itself.
So yesterday when we, I forgot which, remember the program where we were matching faces?
Yep.
And that would be an output layer, is that
Yep.
correct? Okay,
Yep.
because it was giving
It
us.
tells you the confidence distance.
Yes, okay.
Or like in the image I keep showing when I say this is what computer vision is. The output is, oops, I did this to them. I didn't mean to. The output here is, I think this is a kite, and I think this is a kite with 50% certainty.